Thank you. Good afternoon. You know, earlier today we saw some slides up this morning, and one of the slides had a little block, and it said "Winning in a Complex World." And you know, I think that that's a powerful statement. When I first saw the Army operating concept in its newest form, I thought, you know, they really hit it on the mark. Winning, of course, that's a very key word. You know, we want to do that. We don't just want to defend. We don't just want to defeat. We want to win. Whatever that is, whatever that takes. And winning in a complex world. You know, the world is changing. It's changing all around us. You know, it used to be when I was a kid growing up in central Louisiana, I had my choice of 3 TV stations, one of which came in well. I had about 20 radio stations. It was, you know, a lot of them were Cajun French. So I was a consumer of information, and I had one newspaper to choose from. So there were very, very few people that were content creators, and most of us were content consumers. We were viewers. So the world was a much simpler place. And when you look at what's occurred with the cyber field, offensive cyber, defensive cyber, even just cyber exploitation, the world has become a lot more complex. And so, you know, we are going to talk a little bit about the people behind the cyber events, because I think that's important. But I think also we should look at the information that's available if you can train a system to listen for what it is that you're looking for. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So if you're a cyber defender, there are things that you want to know. And it's really good to know these things in advance. You know, who is the threat? Where do they live? What are their organizations? What countries? What languages? What techniques? What tactics? What are their targets? What are they doing? What are they thinking? And I know a lot of you go, well, you know, I'm in cyber, I'm not in intelligence. But, you know, I had the opportunity to attend a cyber network defense team exercise, not but a few weeks ago. And I looked, and these guys were working really, really hard. They were working really smart to defend a network. And I went over to the two, and I said, well, what's your toolkit? You know, you now are let's just assume that they were defending, you know, Tennessee Electric. And now there's an attack on their network. You know, what is in your toolkit as a two to know what was said about this weeks ago? Who knew about this? And who's being affected, and who's being impacted, and who's talking about it now? Because while it's true that those people who are really in the very, very center of the most dangerous cyber attacks, they practice some tradecraft. They go through a lot of work to not get caught. And then they go home. And they have a brother, a sister, or a cousin, a friend, a barber. They have roommates. They have a cab driver. They have all of these people that they work with, all of these people that they talk to. Then there's that entire world of people who are looking, who are, you know, they're tweeting about, one day I want to be a hacktivist, I want to be a this. And then they become script kiddies, and they're practicing things, and they're learning tradecraft, and they're talking about it. And they're talking about what they're learning from the people who actually exercise discipline. So it's not, you can't say the information's not out there, but I will say this, trying to find it with a browser is pretty hard to do. So what I'm going to do is we'll talk a little bit about what's out there and maybe some ways to get at it. So the point I was trying to make about people talking is they do. You know, I did a TEDx talk a few weeks ago, and it was really about changes in culture from what people share. And I took them down the people sharing things that were going to prevent them from ever getting a real job, because it's going to be out there forever. And then also how easy it was in a matter of seconds to find 2,000 or 3,000 people trying to join ISIL, actively trying to join ISIL, and the amount of correspondence that goes with it. It's out there. You just can't find it with a browser. You have to be a little bit smarter and a little more sophisticated than that. So, my space analogy. If you're trying to find something very specific, and in this case, You're trying to determine if there's a moon around this planet. And my tribute to George Lucas with the Star Wars. Extra points, anyone can tell me what kind of ship that is? Ah, very good. Is this a room of geeks or what? So, in any case, you're trying to determine if there's a moon around a planet. The point is, you're never going to find the moon. The moon is dark. It doesn't emanate its own light. It doesn't even really reflect much in the way of light. So what you have to do is you have to observe in the bigger sense. You have to find a way to observe something that can be seen. And then you'll notice if you look at this planet long enough, you'll see a point at which you can't see the planet in a little dot there. That's the thing you're looking for. You're not actually seeing the moon. What you're seeing is its effect, the effect that it's creating on the larger item. And I use that analogy because it is very, very true with social media. You cannot go to any system and immediately find that very thing that you're looking for. So what you have to do is aim your telescope very deliberately at this planet, and you will then see the changes in it. And that's how you find what you're looking for in social media. So the point is the information has to find you. You have to have a deliberate means of saying, here is a group of data, very specific, that if it exists, I want this data coming into my system. And then you have to be able to understand the data. You have to be able to find ways to analyze the data. It could be in other languages. It could be, you want to be able to look at sentiment. You want to be able to break it down by particular country, by particular concept. In this case, I took about an hour and I built a taxonomy for looking at cyber threats. I came up with a few hundred keywords that are commonly used only by people who are in the know. I then broke it down, and these are, whether it was about organizations or whether it was about tactics or whether it was about techniques or whether it was about operating systems and existing viruses or other things. And again, I'm not a cyber guy. I'm a former soft guy. Before that, I was an aviator. So not a cyber guy. So if you catch me on misuse of a few words, feel free to ping me out in the hallway later. And then, you want to look at the sentiment of it. And you want to be able to do that across language. And then you want to be able to actually get from this to what it is that they're saying. Now, this isn't anything too revealing, but the point is that you need to be able to recognize that there are billions of pieces of information out there. You need to break it down into hundreds of thousands of pieces of data coming into a system that then brings it down to the ones that are really important to you. And that's the way that information has to find you, because there's just too much of it out there. So interesting stats, 3+ billion cell phones connected to the internet, 2.2 billion active social media accounts, 500 million tweets, just Twitter alone, a day. And those figures are constantly growing. There is no amount of manpower, no amount of FTEs, there's no amount of people that you can put in a room, give them a browser and a search engine, and have them go out and find what's relevant to you. You have to get smarter, and there has to be a deliberate process to bring the information that's needed to you, to your desktop. So how do you do this? About 4 years ago, I drew this up. And this was, I said to myself, okay, I run a little think tank. And my think tank normally doesn't do this sort of stuff. What we normally do is we wrote a reorg plan for Joint Special Ops. We wrote some stuff for NATO Soft Headquarters, wrote some stuff for SOCOM and other organizations on how do you get at a problem? How do you create a repeatable process? And I said to myself, well, if I really wanted to give let's say that there was a cyber unit that was tasked with defending commercial infrastructure or defense infrastructure. I wanted to give them their own capability. What would I need to do? It would need to look at various pieces of data. It would need to be able to run it through. If you're an analyst, I won't call this analysis. I will call it data enhancement. So you have, what language is it? Can I translate it? What's the sentiment? What do I know about the poster? The person who posted the data. Affinity analytics, this is where you're basically cross-referencing the data that I've pulled against the things that are of interest to me. And then, of course, you need to be able to do evolving topics. I'm going to show you what that is. That's kind of a neat thing. And then what you want to do is before you spit that data into a database that's then accessible by tools, you want in that data to be where you got it, when you got it, why you got it, how you got it, how it was analyzed for language and translated, how it was sentiment analyzed and why, what you know about the poster and why, and tag all of that data so then you can pick your tool of choice, play with the data, and you actually have exactly how it got there. Now, I know we said we were going to talk about social media, not specifically social media analytics, but I think that this process is important because it's how anyone would set up a system to allow data to find them that's relevant to them. So we have a product. I'm not going to do a sales pitch, but this is a social media analytics appliance. In 21U worth of racks is everything you see there, including portal and at the same time chat and it does sentiment analytics and translation, identity resolution, all of that in the privacy of a box. And you basically, there's two plugs. You plug in power, you plug it into the internet, and 100 users are in the social media analytics business. We designed that because that's what an organization like Hilton Hotels would want, or Dick Clark Productions and and other folks like that. But then we also saw the ability to be able to take this and put one in a fusion cell, or the ability to be able to put one in a task force. And so we actually deliver one of these in Tampa on Monday for use against the current fight. And they're turnkey. You plug them in, and it gives you your 3D geospatial and all of that, and your various dashboards, so that if you're an executive, you want to only be able to see bigger things, and if you're an analyst, you want to be able to see everything, so that you can play with it. So how do you set up a mission? Forget about the system that I just showed you. Think about how it is that you as a cyber professional would need to be able to set up a process to bring you information relevant to your mission. You have to determine what it is that you want out of this, what particular maybe languages and keywords and things like that it's going to be relevant to you. And then you need to bring that data in, and you need to analyze the heck out of it, so that before it comes to you, it's already, most of the hard work has been done, and then you're able to navigate very quickly through the toolkit that you want. And whether this is an appliance or whether it's an enterprise, this is very important, because what we have now is we have a lot of guys and gals sitting there at browsers looking back here to try to find what's relevant to them, rather than setting up a deliberate process. This particular screen is I think this is the little taxonomy I threw together for cyber defense. I think it took me about an hour to create one. I click go, and it's actually running, it runs right now. And it's real time, and it does about 250 million URLs. And we don't do dark web because we haven't been asked to do that sort of thing. But again, this process becomes important, is that there is too much data out there to not put a deliberate, user-tailorable process that brings the data to you, so that then you can navigate in it more quickly. So I told you that there was a thing called evolving topics. So what you're looking at here is, I put about 20 interesting keywords in there. And I said, okay, these are words that I think people who are involved in the either cyber defense or offensive cyber operations are talking about. And I put those words in, and I said, just give it to me. And what the system does then is it analyzes those words. And it says, okay, those words are contained in these conversations. And if I were to sit back and look at those conversations and break them down into groups or streams of thought, what would it look like? And so, whereas Twitter has a thing, Twitter uses some IBM analytics to generate a Twitter word cloud. It's a math model. It says, okay, these are the words minus the noise words that people are talking about. The difference between that and evolving topics is, it's not one word cloud. It actually smartly broke it down into various conversations. So when I sent these slides on, I think, Friday afternoon, this was a snapshot of what people were talking about on Friday afternoon. And if you look, there's a center word, and then it sort of just builds a little circle around it. And while I was sitting down, I was, looking at one of the other ones, the taxonomies we have, which is, an ISIL taxonomy, and various words that people use for ISIL. And I started looking at, there's obviously, it's showing that the people are talking about the Syrian forces retaking some ancient town, whatever is ongoing as we speak. And that's useful to me because I didn't know to look for that. I didn't have the word Syrian in my taxonomy. In fact, I didn't have any of these words. I didn't put any of these words in my taxonomy. I don't know, and I certainly didn't put that one in there, but it keeps appearing. It doesn't filter for curse words, so my apologies if anybody's offended. So then the next one is, how do people feel about it? Sentiment analytics in native language. If you want to find people talking positively, in a positive way, about certain words and phrases and things that are key to cyber, very simple. You actually click on, my bad, I did that. Okay. You basically filter this by positive and negative sentiment. You look over at the word, or you click the little box down here, and then you can click on that, and it'll actually show you what they're talking about here. And they pop up. These are the actual snippets. A snippet is the phrase that contains what you're looking for, plus the one before, plus the one after. And the reason is sarcasm. You don't want it to sentiment score something that's sarcastic, so you average it out into 3 sentences built around the one that you were looking for, so you can determine the general sentiment of the statement. And then, of course, you can click on any one of these and it'll expand it, where it got it, when it got it, why it got it, all of those types of things. These are your positive sentiment words. This is doxing. That's one of the phrases that was in the fetch. And then here's the actual post itself. Again, to a non-cyber guy, is that relevant? Only if you're looking at a particular case. So here's another interesting one. Not everything can be mapped, but you're talking about people. So you've got a cyber event ongoing that either you're doing or someone else is doing. It'd be interesting to find out, let's reverse that, what people are saying about what you're doing, as well as what people are saying about something that's happening to you. So, the statistic is, and you'll hear people say, well, 3% of tweets can be geolocated. That's actually not a true statement. The actual ones where the phones are on, where there's a geotag that's not the author known location, but I can't remember what the actual query field is in their GNIP API, but it comes to about 15% can be geotagged. Only 3% of them were geotagged at the instance of the tweet itself. Then you have things like Twitter has additional features that they can do where they'll add the geospatial enhancement to that when you're querying the Twitter stream. That allows you to get that number a good bit higher. Then there's the author's profile, and you could pull off of it, and you can do a lat long off of the city center. So maybe you can get it only down to city and not down to house. So the answer is, down to the physical address, you're right, 3%. Down to the general vicinity of the area of a town, probably get about 15%. Down to the city, you can actually get somewhere around probably 70%, 75%, down to the town or city. And that's going to be based off of the author's profile. But all of that data was pulled when the actual tweet was pulled. So it's all resident to within the system, so that you can actually sit here and you can look at the various things that people are saying. Here's a word cloud that shows up over on that map. So this is what people are talking about there, and then of course you can get in much more detailed. So what can social media tell you? If you're defending and an event is happening, it's happening right now, and you have a two shop. And then you have your operators themselves. And just as you're able to go to TechNet, you ought to be able to go to something like this. because while you're trying to fix a problem, while you're trying to understand a problem, not only the scope of it, but the technique, and then you're also trying to understand the after effects of it, the thing is that it's a tool. This is so if you want to know who's being affected, how they're being affected, how far the reach is, how far is it spread, is there another one? Was there another one? Did somebody else blog about having already experienced the very same thing that you're experiencing? I will tell you, we know to go to, and I'm an MCSC. I used to teach the course, and I'm a big fan of TechNet. I haven't done that in 20 years, but the point is that I would always like to learn from the guy who's had this problem happen to him before. And then, of course, there's all of this information. Now, the next question comes of, is this an intelligence tool? Is social media analytics an intelligence tool? I would argue no, not at all. It's an operator tool. It almost has to be, because because you have a job to do, and just as you ought to be able to go to a knowledge base and a resource to find out what's been going on, how people have addressed it, how people have fixed it. I will tell you, I spent about 15 years in Joint Special Operations, always in low density areas, and I've done a number of deployments, I think 4 or 5 of them with them, and information is key. It's situational awareness is key. And so I would argue that while there is a big intelligence component to social media analytics and access to social media, there's also a huge leadership component to it in situational awareness. There's a huge operator component to it for situational awareness. The thing is that unless you want to go it alone, the thing is, remember, there are 2.2 billion content producers out there. So can you find everything? No, you can't. But there is a wealth of knowledge out there that is far greater than what sits inside of the wire. And again, a lot of it today isn't organized in neat subscriptions. It's out there in the world of social media. So without any further ado, I think that's my pitch on social media analytics. Are there any questions for me? Yes.
PT, sir? Yes, sir. I just wondered, two quick questions. Number one, does the device come with subscriptions to the providers?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does. So when all of them, and again, I did not come here specifically to do a sales pitch, but sure. I will tell you about our approach. Our approach is, before we started the 2+ year path to build this thing, which we built with IBM and Luciad, a company called IDS, and Hewlett-Packard. Those are the companies. My company owns the IP. They are all partners within the development of this. Before we started that, we sat down with Twitter, and we sat down with BoardReader, and we sat down with a few others, and we negotiated the ability to be able to provide that for certain uses. Obviously, you know, the rules are constantly changing, sure. And so we have to look at every single use case for it, and we have to, even with the sale of it, we will hook it up to the data, and we will provide the interim data, but then in the future it has to be done between the owner of the system and ultimately Twitter and others.
Sure. And the second question is there analytics involved to help validate the data in some way so that we can validate, you know, the authenticity of it or origination of that data? Or is it just categorization?
No, it's more than categorization. There is inside of it. Our starting point for doing this was social media analytics in the cloud, the IBM offering. IBM has a very big, very successful cloud offering. Our starting point was going to IBM and saying, you know, that's an amazing tool, but most of our customers can't work in the cloud, and they want to work in privacy. What would it take to put that into a box where it's private, it's all there's nothing to install, and you can do it. Within that, an original offering, which is a part of our part of the solution, is clout scores and follower, all of the reporting that you would want to do if you're Nike, so that you would want to know if it's real or if it's not. Who is this person? Things of that. You can identify demographics, male, female, married, kids, things of that nature, is all a part of the analytics that are done. But when you say whether or not something that somebody posts is true, it's only digitally true. It's true that they posted it. That's so beyond that, there's no correlation factor between what they say and reality truth, which is the world we live in. You just have to take it as digitally true.
Hi. First off, I want to thank you for throwing in the Star Wars question in there. It makes me feel good knowing something. But I'm actually a professor of criminal justice at Armstrong State University in Savannah. And I take a look at this, and the first thing that pops into my mind is research of suspects.
Yep.
Right? So I was wondering if that kind of, where I can plug in somebody's name and then get their Facebook profile, see if they, posted a picture with them in stolen property, or link that to their Twitter account. And did you build in that kind of
We did. So there is
usability?
a law enforcement model of this called CPAS, C-P-A-S. It was developed with Las Vegas PD in mind, and we're putting a pilot together, and we're using some of their folks that they've worked with in the Joint Terrorism Task Force doing social media analytics for domestic cells. But their intent is to look at drugs, to look at organized crime, to look at things of that nature and be able to break it down, and then ultimately be able to pass that information on even to the cop in the car. So to answer your question, yes, we've already begun that road. I think we're probably about 60 days away from being able to build their taxonomy that they want, specifically for the Vegas law enforcement area.
I had a couple of questions for you that are all linked to the implications for this, both given the investigative component of it, but also for the optics of it. What, if anything, do you have in this system that helps either prevent misuse of it or that logs the activity of the users so that misuse can be detected afterwards? And what sort of an evidence trail does it leave for when you need to investigate and prove up a chain of custody or a chain of use for use in court?
That's a good question. First of all, it is an appliance. By that nature, it is a very limited use space. Extensive logging is already enabled within the system as to who logged on, who did what, when. So that's already being done. So you can go back and you can rebuild the activities of what occurred within the system itself. But keep in mind that when you're selling either a weapon system or a tool or anything like that, you can't foresee everything. And there again, there's nothing. The system will bring data to you. But that data that it brought to you was data that if you would have typed in the right character string in the right Google Chrome browser on the right day doing the right thing, you would have found yourself. So it's all PAI. It's publicly available information. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the mountain of publicly available information and put it in a spoon in a bite-sized chunk for the person who actually needed that bite-sized chunk of that data. But yes, there is extensive logging already pre-built into the system for that purpose. It will not tell you that later they saw their girlfriend on there and then decided to do something nefarious with it. That it won't do. But what it will tell you is the person logged on, they found this information, they clicked through this and they went to the original to look at the original tweet. No more questions? Oh, wait, one more. Excellent.
Perhaps I'm being a bit dense with this, because I am also not a cyber person, and I may be oversimplifying. But with social media having such a wealth of knowledge, as you've clearly stated, and you want to take this and, in a sense, take this and make it down. How does it do that? How does it get, how do you not basically give an info dump to those searchers? Yes, it does have those string keywords, but that's still, like, let's say cannabis or, illegal arms, things like that. Like, that's a ton of information that it's still going to pull. So how does it filter that?
Okay, that's a great question. So it's all about the taxonomy. So when you have a system and it has all of these processes in it, within that system is what's called missions. So the owner of the system, the person who has it, can set up a mission, and they can set up 10 missions, they can set up 15 missions. A mission might be, I'm interested in cannabis and 30 different versions of the word cannabis in this particular language, in this particular time frame, in this particular geographic area, in this particular, and you give it that. Then it will go out and it will get that data. Now, once that has that data, it analyzes everything that it got, and it did all of the data augmentation, if you want to call it that, instead of analytics. And then it breaks it down into affinities. So now you can actually, while that data is sitting in a database, that's not what you're seeing. What you're seeing is a series of living touch-based filters. So you can scroll through, or you can click through and say, well, I'm only interested in it during this time frame. I'm only interested in it if it also included this particular feature, or this particular context, or this particular sentiment, or this particular, and so what happens is all of those pie charts that I showed on a touch screen, you touch on them and it breaks it down below, and then you can resort it further and you touch on that and it resorts it below, and then you can say show snippets and it'll show you the data that comprises that, and then you can expand on any of those. But the point is that what we're trying to do is take billions, turn billions into hundreds of thousands, turns hundreds of thousands into 20 to 80 choices, then take those 20 to 80 choices and break it down into the, say, 200 particular posts that you want to see right now. And then, of course, all of those are hyperlinked so that you can see, you can basically, every time that you click on something, it affects everything else, and then you can bounce around and then see the original tweet. So it allows you to get to the heart of a matter in a few seconds rather than a lot of digging and reading. So I hope, did that answer your question? Yes, sir. Okay.
Okay. Hey, you did raise a really important issue, which is the ongoing discussion with Intel oversight responsibilities. So one of the things I think that we've got to be very careful about, and some of it was alluded to in a couple of earlier questions, is we have very strict requirements on U.S. persons, which is a very broad category, as you're aware, what we do with that data, how we audit any contact, absolutely being able to track provenance of anything that, any analysis that we create out of this. And there are very rigorous oversight and compliance regimens. So if you think about some of the ongoing discussion, even today, from Mr. Snowden, his disclosures, what I think kept NSA in business was very rigorous application of Intel oversight and compliance. And frankly, if they had not gone to the levels that they had exercised to track inadvertent disclosure, report, discipline for failing to report, and those types of things, that the outcome could have been much different. So as we get into this business, and we'll actually get up to West Virginia here on a visit in a couple of weeks to actually kind of take a look at some of this, what I would offer is we got to be very cognizant of our responsibilities, particularly on the government side. Now, law enforcement, they operate under different authorities. They have different procedures, so it may be rules of evidence that are much different than, for instance, intelligence analysis. But I think we got to get the communities together, because right now there are a lot of people that are kind of yelling across the table at each other what this is, what it isn't, and what we're doing is we're kind of tying our hands behind our backs as we kind of break into almost competing camps, and that's not helpful. There's a way forward, and I think we're all going to have to come together around this, but it's not very clean right now. Depending on who you talk to, they'll say it's absolutely clean as long as you do it my way, right?
I've heard that, sir.
And so I think we've got to be we got to rise above this pretty quickly. The other thing is we also have to be careful, because if you think about the way CIA, as they led, OSINT, and it really became this almost niche capability of open source intelligence that did not touch classified intelligence, and so sometimes you had competing narratives. And what, at least on the Army side, we've worked is how you actually integrate social media as a form of information or intelligence, properly minimized, into traditional reporting. And in some cases, social media, we may have much greater volume and variety and velocity of information than we will in traditional intelligence collection, particularly when you start into an area. But there's a certain point where you have your collection in place, you have your sensors deployed, they're starting to report, and then the two of them used to balance each other. That becomes much more useful than either traditional collection by itself, not balanced by this type of information, or this type of information that's not checked and balanced by traditional intelligence collection. So I think as we move forward, it's going to be the ability to handle, again, volume, variety, velocity, within the law, whichever law we're going to use.
Yes,
That's going to actually dictate how we're going to conduct these operations, and then how we actually merge it with all the other sources. So instead of making this as a discipline, frankly, it becomes data, and it's no better, no worse under certain circumstances than any other data. And I think we've got to get over that piece of it. So as we continue to work through this, certainly on the intel side, there's going to be a lot of interest in this. On the cyber side, there's going to be a lot of interest. And then from the operations side, but I think we're at a point now where if we don't come together, then what could happen is this thing gets halted from overseers, and then we're denied the ability to use this in any type of rational way. So I guess my advocacy right now is I know who's claiming kind of proponency for this type of data right now, at least within the military and within the intel community. And I think all the parties have got to come together. We got to make some decisions. We got to set up, what the rule set is going to be, just like we do for SIGINT right now, and then we move forward. And I think you'll bring a lot of experience, a lot of capability to the table. But for those in this room that touch this, this is very, very complex. It's very, very important. And we cannot afford to screw it up, because if we do, we're going to deny ourselves the access to this under really any circumstances. So, as a voice, I assume of reason, what I would just ask everyone is to enter and try to drive the dialogue, not avoid the dialogue or evade the dialogue, and then let's come up with a rule set that we can all live by, and then we can really exploit this. But that's my concern right now.
So those are very, very wise words, and I say that was specifically why we kept it at publicly available information that is available through a browser, if you could find it, and specifically helping to get that data to you and keeping it away from any data that was, quote, hard to get or obtained through any other means. And 2 years ago, I'm also a reservist, and I was mobilized to CENTCOM when I was living in DC. And one of the things that I was asked to do was to co-chair the Iraq OPT for General Austin. So I was the J3's chairman, and the J5 had a chairman. And of course, things are not looking particularly good in that region. And we said to ourselves, well, what are the people saying? What are the people saying to each other? And I went around and I looked through all of the traditional sources, including up at Langley and others, and we didn't really have anything like this. And at that point, I left mobilization and went back to build this. And the reason I did was because one of the first things that I saw when I turned it on and sort of geospatially rendering it is this hegemonous Sunnistan. This idea that there's these Sunnis trapped between, in their minds, a king, Shia, and Assad. And they're sort of stuck in between there and nowhere, quote, to go. And that's what they say to themselves. That's what they're saying to each other. Is it true? I don't know. It's digitally true. They perceive it, or at least they say it. And so having said that, and of course we broke it down into political, military, economic, social, information infrastructure, they don't like the fact that they can't get electricity. That's a useful thing to know, things of that nature. But that's why we went back to go build this, and we kept it off of the government networks. There were no government dollars involved in the R&D or the build at all. This is 100% privately funded, 100% privately owned. And we know that within government it's going to be a very difficult sell because it's not an enterprise solution. So we're focusing primarily on the commercial sector. But I think that as you're looking at cyber network defense, it's important because behind every cyber network attack are people. There's people out there, and they're talking a lot, and you'd be shocked how much they're talking. So thank you very much. I know I've probably gone over on my time, but it was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. That was awesome. And for you, once more, a coveted ACI Black Badge. Don't worry, we're only giving out one more. There's only one more 20-minute speaker today, but don't worry. 8 September, Cyber Talks New York City. Toss your abstract in. Maybe you too could be one of the coveted badge holders if you're cool enough to be put on this stage. Thanks,
Thank you
Rob.
very much.
I appreciate it.
I'm concerned about what TSA is going to say. I've been looking at these all day going, how am I going to put this in my luggage? But thank you very much.